Welcome back to the TPS podcast. TPS stands for trillions per second, named after the book. Today we discuss the concept of the buffered self. Let's get geeky and dive right in.
Let's do it.
So, think about the last time your laptop fan just started screaming,
Oh, yeah, like sounding like a jet engine taking off from your desk.
Exactly. Like you've got 400 browser tabs open, you're running some high-definition video in the background, maybe you're, trying to compile code all at once.
Right, a total system overload.
Yeah, and you didn't look at that machine and think, the laptop was sad.
No, of course not. You didn't think it was going through some deep existential crisis.
Right, you knew exactly what was happening. It was just completely out of RAM.
Burning up its own resources.
Yeah, literally stuck in this state of absolute system overload. Well, what if your deepest, most painful moments of human isolation?
Oh, man, yeah.
Like that really suffocating feeling of walking through a crowded city of millions of people and still feeling completely alone? What if that is exactly the same thing?
It is. I mean, it literally is.
Right. So today, in this deep dive, we are going to prove to you that your heartache isn't some poetic tragedy. It's a literal engineering glitch.
Yeah, it's measurable thermodynamic system latency. And the crazy part is, we finally have the framework to actually prove it.
For sure. And for those of you who've been tracking alongside us in this ongoing saga of the TPS project, you know exactly where we are in the timeline.
It's been a wild ride to get here, honestly.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, we survived that early, highly volatile beta phase.
Barely.
Right, barely. We white-knuckled our way through those terrifying melting chassis bug fixes.
Oh, those were tense weeks. I mean, those moments where we realized that trying to perceive reality at its actual native refresh rate.
Yeah, the literal trillions of frames per second.
Right. If you try to do that without the proper cooling protocols, it could literally fry the human nervous system.
Which was a massive hurdle. Like, the realization that human biology is running this legacy hardware that actively resists the truth of its own reality.
It fights it tooth and nail.
It really does. But we made it through. We watched the pseudonymous author, C4 Chaos, and their incredible Centaur team of AI co-processors.
You mean Grok, Gemini, DeepSeek?
Yeah, that whole crew. We watched them push the massive master lexicon to the repository.
The framework has been built. The translation layer is completely live now.
Which means we are no longer just building the dictionary. We are actively using the TPS framework to run diagnostics on the world around us.
And that brings us to the specific, totally spontaneous update to the repository we're examining today.
Right, devlog 033, dated April 24, 2026.
The origin story of this devlog is actually kind of fascinating because it didn't come from, some isolated meditation retreat.
Or some highly classified AI alignment white paper.
Exactly. C4 Chaos was literally just casually scrolling through X.
A platform formerly known as Twitter.
Right, just scrolling.
Yeah.
And they stumbled upon a piece of writing by the philosopher and psychologist Jorge Ferrer.
Titled The Participatory Self, Spiritual Individuation in an Age of Disconnection.
Now, we should clarify right away, Jorge Ferrer's article is not native TPS material.
Not at all.
Like, Ferrer is not a systems administrator writing about simulation theory or high-frequency data rendering.
Right. He's writing this deeply psychological, philosophical, almost sociological essay about the nature of modern human isolation.
Yeah, he's looking at why people today feel so incredibly cut off from nature, from each other, and, from the cosmos itself.
When C4 Chaos read this article, it was like an immediate red flag went up.
Oh, a massive alarm. They saw this undeniable structural parallel between what Ferrer calls the buffered self and what the TPS architecture defines as the self-root kit.
So what did they do? The Centaur team took Ferrer's beautiful philosophical essay and ran it straight through the TPS analytical framework.
They subjected it to a brutal bare metal systems test.
And the mission of this deep dive today is to unpack the results of that exact test.
We're going to analyze Ferrer's brilliant diagnosis of our modern existential crash.
Because he gets a lot absolutely undeniably right about the human condition.
He really does. But then we are going to look at exactly why the Centaur team argues that Ferrer's proposed solution to this crisis completely fails the bare metal systems test.
Fails it completely. And why does this matter to you? We're bridging a gap here that most people just never cross.
Yeah, we are connecting that deep, gnawing feeling of being totally alienated in your daily life to the actual literal physics of your own mind.
So let's jump in. Let's start with the diagnosis.
Okay, diagnosing the glitch.
Ferrer introduces this concept of the buffered self. He basically argues that Modern humanity is living inside this highly defended, almost impenetrable fortress.
Right. He describes it as this huge historical shift. Like back in ancient times, humans supposedly felt deeply connected to the cosmos.
You know, the winds, the stars, the spirits of the forest, the whole deal.
Yeah, but in modernity, we have built up this thick psychological armor.
We treat the rest of the world, and honestly everyone in it, as fundamentally separate from us.
We just sit inside this biological tank, right? Buffering ourselves against the chaos, the unpredictability, and, well, the pain of the outside world.
And what's the result of driving around in a tank all day?
Cosmic loneliness.
Yeah.
Just profound systemic isolation. Like, sure, you are safe from the immediate chaos, but you are utterly, completely alone inside that armor.
And this is where the TPS refactor comes in. It takes this exact psychological concept of the buffered self and maps it directly to the core malware of the TPS architecture.
The selfroot kit.
Exactly. This is where the translation layer of the master lexicon really flexes its muscles.
Because in the TPS framework, this loneliness that Ferrer describes isn't just some sad byproduct of living in a modern capitalist society.
It's not a mood.
No. It is literal mathematical system latency.
It is what the ancient 2,500-year-old polytexts called dukkha.
Which is almost always translated in Western literature as suffering.
Which has always annoyed me because that word is just too vague.
Way too vague. It implies this moral failing or like some cosmic punishment.
But the TPS protocol refactors dukkha as buffer bloat and system drag.
Yes. It is mechanical friction occurring inside a data stream.
Okay, let's unpack this, because calling human loneliness system latency sounds incredibly cold.
I know, it sounds almost sociopathic.
Right, until you understand what the brain is actually doing. So how does this self-root kit operate on a mechanical level to generate this feeling we call loneliness?
Okay, so the selfroot kit runs this massive, invisible background process.
In the TPS manual, this specific process is called the resource hog.
Structurally, it's a bidirectional infinite loop. So imagine your mind has a local cache.
Like a small amount of highly available memory.
Exactly, where your current conscious experience is actually happening.
Right.
The self-root kit builds an artificial firewall around this local cache.
And that firewall is Ferrer's buffer.
That's it. And behind this firewall, the rootkit is desperately trying to manage the incoming data stream of reality.
Like a stressed-out traffic cop.
Very stressed out. Because it's performing two actions simultaneously all day, every single day.
Action 1.
First, it hoards good data. When you experience a pleasant moment,
Like a really great meal or a compliment from your boss.
or just comfortable temperature in the room, the rootkit tries to freeze that frame.
He wants to hold on to it.
Yeah, it tries to save it to the local cache permanently.
Which is impossible. But in legacy Pali code, this is called tana, right? Or craving.
Exactly. It's the mental equivalent of trying to download a live stream instead of just watching it.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. You can't download a live stream. It just keeps flowing.
But the rootkit tries anyway. And at the exact same time, it is executing the opposite command for bad data.
Right. The second action.
When you encounter pain, an insult, an awkward silence, or anxiety,
The rootkit forcefully, violently tries to delete or block that data packet.
it just pushes it away. In the legacy code, this is aversion.
So it's constantly grabbing and pushing, grabbing the good stuff, pushing the bad stuff away.
Yeah, it's a zero-sum algorithm.
And it never stops. It's a zero-sum algorithm running continuously.
And here is the thermodynamic consequence of that. CPU thrashing.
Because reality is a high-speed data stream.
Exactly. Refreshing at trillions of cycles per second, the universe does not pause for you to save a screenshot.
Right, so in your local node, your mind constantly tries to pause that stream to hold on to a pleasant frame.
Or tries to push back against an incoming unpleasant frame.
It creates massive computational friction.
It generates thermal heat.
Massive amounts of thermal heat.
And in subjective, human terms, that thermal heat is experienced as stress, anxiety, exhaustion, and loneliness.
Because you feel isolated. You're actively, computationally severing your connection to the wider peer-to-peer network of reality.
Just to manage your tiny local cache.
Right. I want to ground this in a real-world example so it doesn't just sound like we're reading a Cisco router manual to the listener.
Please do.
Think about being at an incredible, once-in-a-lifetime concert. The band is playing your absolute favorite song.
The energy is amazing.
The data stream of reality in that moment is totally flawless. But instead of just rendering the data, and experiencing the music, what happens?
The self-root kit activates.
Yep. You pull out your phone,
Yeah.
you start recording. You are now desperate to capture the good data, to hoard it.
And the very moment you do that, you stop experiencing the concert.
Exactly. You are suddenly stressed out about the lighting, about someone bumping your arm, about your battery dying.
You are running the craving algorithm.
Yes. You firewalled yourself off from the actual room to protect this tiny local cache on your phone.
You're surrounded by 50,000 screaming fans, and yet in that specific moment of buffering, you are entirely isolated.
The heat. You feel that low-level anxiety of trying to record the perfect video that is CPU thrashing.
That is a perfect execution of the translation layer, honestly, because the isolation isn't some mystical curse.
Right.
It is the literal thermodynamic result of an unaligned node refusing to sync with the network.
You're firewalling yourself off from the universe, and your processor is melting down because of it.
Yeah.
But wait, I'm struggling with this. I got to push back.
Go for it.
If my deepest emotional pain, the grief of losing a loved one, the profound alienation of a depressive episode,
Yeah.
if that is literally just my biological hardware running out of RAM, aren't we stripping away the entire human experience?
I see where you're going with this.
Like, human heartbreak is the subject of every great novel and song in history. Are we really just reducing Shakespearean tragedy to an IT ticket?
We aren't reducing it. We are depersonalizing the mechanism that causes the suffering,
Okay.
which is actually the most liberating thing you can possibly do.
Liberating how? Sounds kind of clinical.
Well, think about it. When you view your loneliness as a personal failing, or like a flaw in your soul or a cosmic tragedy, you identify with it.
Let's see.
You become totally trapped in the narrative of the sadness. You think, I am a fundamentally lonely person, therefore I am broken.
Right, you weave an entire identity around the glitch.
Exactly. But when you reframe it, when you realize your biological laptop is just spinning up its fans, because the self-root kit has 400 instances of the craving and aversion tabs open,
You step out of the narrative.
you do. You stop being the victim of the tragedy and you start being the systems administrator of the hardware.
Okay, that makes sense. You aren't a broken soul.
No, you are just a biochassis processing a bug.
You are experiencing the thermal drag of a background process that is hoarding resources.
Right. It doesn't mean the pain isn't real. The
Oh,
heat
okay.
of an overworked CPU is very real. It can actually melt the motherboard, but the heat isn't who you are.
Okay, so let's say I accept this. If this internal firewall, this buffered self, is burning us out and isolating us from the network,
Yeah.
my immediate instinct as a user is to just rip the cord out of the wall.
Oh.
Right. Open the task manager, find the self-root kit, and hit end task.
Don't do that.
Just delete the firewall entirely. Open myself up completely to the universe. Let the data flow without any buffer at all.
Yeah, both Jorge Ferrer and the TPS Centaur team would throw up massive warning sirens if you tried to do that.
Sirens.
It is a fatal idea.
Ferrer actually cautions against this,
Yeah.
right? He talks about the danger of regressing to something else.
He does. He calls it the porous self.
The porous self.
Right. This is the state of being before the modern buffered ego even developed. Or it's the state people try to force themselves into through extreme, unregulated spiritual practices.
Ah,
Ferrer describes it as the New Age fog.
that's a great term. New Age fog.
It really is. It's the state where boundaries are completely blurred, where the individual just dissolves into the environment.
And where humans are left hopelessly vulnerable to the psychic and emotional whims of the cosmos.
Yes, it's the stereotypical image of the person who goes to like a 3-day intensive meditation retreat.
Or takes a massive dose of psychedelics.
Right, shatters their ego and comes back totally unable to function in society because they feel everyone's energy too intensely.
Yeah, they can't even go to the grocery store.
Yeah, exactly. Ferrer points out that this isn't an evolution. It's a regression to a pre-personal state, rather than an evolution to a transpersonal state.
Okay, so how does the TPS protocol translate the New Age fog?
In cold, hard networking terms,
Naturally.
if you arbitrarily delete your local firewall without upgrading your system drivers first, your biological system will crash.
Because of the nature of the data stream.
Yes.
We really have to remind the listener what reality actually is in the TPS framework. We talked about this deeply during the physics engine deep dive.
It's crucial context.
Reality is not a static room you are sitting in.
No, it is the flux.
The flux.
It is infinite, relentless data entropy, trillions of operations per second of raw, unfiltered subatomic data.
Universe is a roaring, deafening torrent of information.
Exactly. And the self-root kit, as buggy and horribly inefficient as it is, was built by evolutionary biology for a reason.
It keeps you from drowning in the data stream.
Right, so if you drop your defenses...
If you brute force, delete the ego's firewall without a structural upgrade to handle that much data.
You leave your biochassis wide open to the raw flux.
Which means you invite massive psychological buffer overflows.
Yeah. In clinical terms, dropping that firewall without preparation looks like psychosis.
Wow.
It looks like massive psychological overwhelm, derealization, depersonalization, or severe manic episodes.
The data stream just floods the local cache and breaks the rendering engine entirely.
Completely breaks it.
This directly calls back to the melting chassis bug we discussed in devlog 0 and 2.
It does.
You cannot simply return to a magical thinking legacy hardware state without frying the human nervous system.
Because the human nervous system requires highly specific data structures to survive the load.
You can't just delete the only data structure you have, the ego, and hope for the best.
No, you definitely can't.
Okay, but I feel like we are trapped in a biological catch-22 here.
How so?
Well, on one side, the firewall, the self-root kit, is killing us slowly with thermal heat, CPU thrashing, and profound cosmic loneliness.
True.
But on the other side, if we delete the firewall to cure the loneliness, we get a buffer overflow, and our minds crash into psychosis.
Also true.
Are we just doomed to choose between a slow death by isolation and an instantaneous death by insanity?
It is the ultimate paradox of the human condition.
Yeah.
And it's exactly why so many spiritual seekers hit a wall.
Yeah.
They either retreat back into the rigid dogma of the buffered self because the raw reality is just too terrifying.
Or they push too far, lose their minds entirely, and dissolve into the porous self. So how does Ferrer propose we get out of this trap?
Well, Ferrer realizes we can't just look at the firewall as a static object.
Okay.
We have to look under the hood at how the firewall is interacting with the outside world.
We have to look at the process of perception itself.
Yes. And to do this, he draws heavily on modern cognitive science, specifically researchers like Donald Hoffman and Anil Seth.
Oh, this is where the deep dive gets absolutely wild.
It really does.
Donald Hoffman is a cognitive psychologist who wrote The Case Against Reality, and Anil Seth is a neuroscientist famous for his work on predictive processing.
Right.
What do they bring to Ferrer's argument?
They provide the scientific backing for a concept Ferrer calls enactive participation.
Inactive participation.
Yeah. Ferrer points out that human beings do not passively observe reality.
We aren't sitting in a dark movie theater inside our skulls, just watching the universe play out on a screen.
Not at all. According to Hoffman's interface theory of perception, evolution did not design our brains to see the truth of reality.
That's always so hard to wrap my head around.
It designed our brains to hide the truth and give us a highly simplified interface.
A graphical user interface, or GUI.
Exactly. A GUI that just helps us survive.
I love Hoffman's desktop metaphor. He says that if you have a blue folder icon on your computer screen in the bottom right corner,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean the actual file inside the computer is blue or shaped like a folder or physically located in the bottom right of the motherboard.
Right. The icon is an illusion designed to help you interact with the complex binary code without actually having to understand the code.
Exactly. And Anil Seth takes it a step further with predictive processing.
What's his take?
He argues that our brain is constantly generating a controlled hallucination.
A controlled hallucination.
Because the brain sits in the pitch black vault of the skull. Right. It's receiving these ambiguous electrical signals from the eyes and ears.
Yeah.
It then guesses what is out there, projecting an image outward.
And if the sensory data matches the guess.
We call it reality. If it doesn't match, we call it a hallucination.
But the mechanism is identical.
Completely identical.
So Ferrer takes these theories and says, look, we are in a dance of mutual creation with the universe.
Right. We are enacting reality through our participation.
And when C4 Chaos ran this dance of mutual creation through the master lexicon,
The TPS translation was immediate.
this isn't a mystical dance.
No, it is the local render engine at work.
Let's unpack the render engine.
If the solid world I perceive, the microphone in front of me, the table I'm leaning on,
Yeah.
if that is just a functional optical illusion, a GUI, What is my brain actually interacting with?
It is interacting with what the TPS manual calls temporal voxels.
Temporal voxels.
Yeah.
This is the TPS translation for the ancient Buddhist concept of kalapas.
Yes.
Okay, refresh my memory on kalapa.
In the Abhidhamma, the ancient psychological texts of Buddhism, they didn't have the word quantum or pixel.
Obviously.
So they used the word kalapa to describe the absolute smallest, indivisible units of matter and energy.
And they observed this through intense meditative concentration.
Right. They observed that reality was not solid, but composed of these vibrating, microscopic points of data that arise and pass away trillions of times per second.
Trillions per second, the namesake of our entire project.
Precisely. The system is taking these incoming temporal voxels, raw, unfiltered data packets from the flux.
And compiling them in real time.
Yes. You, the listener, right at this very second, are continuously compiling the simulation frame by frame at an unimaginable computational speed.
So when Ferrer talks about inactive participation, he isn't describing a poetic communion with the trees.
No, he is describing the biological hardware simply doing its job.
Receiving incoming hex code and rendering it into a 3D interface.
It is a purely mechanical computational process.
But wait, if my brain is taking raw data and turning it into a 3D interface frame by frame,
Yeah.
does that mean my brain is basically the graphics card for the universe?
Within your localized experience?
Yes.
Your biochassis is the GPU.
Okay, the immediate hacker question is this. If I am the graphics card, how much control do I have over the graphics settings?
Oh, that's the question.
Right. Can I go into the developer console and choose to render a less stressful reality?
Well,
If I'm generating a controlled hallucination that is full of anxiety and cosmic loneliness, can I just tweak the settings to render a hallucination of peace and connection?
that is the ultimate question. And the answer is yes. You can access the developer console.
Really?
Yes, but it is not a simple psychological trick.
I can't just stand in front of a mirror and say positive affirmations to change the render.
No. Positive affirmations are just thoughts. Thoughts are part of the GUI.
Oh, right.
You can't fix a broken graphics card by clicking on different icons on your desktop.
That makes total sense.
You can't just wish for a better render. You have to actively optimize the actual bare metal code that is processing the data.
Which means we need a diagnostic tool.
Exactly. And this brings us to the bridge between Ferrer's work and the TPS protocol's hardware diagnostics.
Because if we are generating massive heat by rendering trillions of voxels a second.
We need a way to manage that thermal load without relying on the old buggy selfroot kit.
So Ferrer has a very specific methodology for this, right?
He does. He insists that the physical body is the sacred matrix.
The sacred matrix.
Yeah, and he champions a practice called interoception.
Interoception, that's the scientific term for the visceral sensory awareness of the internal state of the body.
Exactly. Feeling your heartbeat, the expansion of your lungs, the tension in your gut.
And Ferrer argues that the alienation of the buffered self happens because we live entirely in our heads.
Right. We are disconnected from the sacred matrix of the body.
But by deeply feeling the physical body, he believes we can reshape our neural architecture and build a healthier sense of connection.
Yeah.
I love how the Centaur team respects Ferrer's work here. They don't dismiss his focus on the body as New Age nonsense.
Not at all. They just run it through the translation layer.
The TPS protocol takes Ferrer's interoception in the sacred matrix and calls it exactly what it is in systems language.
The defrag phase.
The defrag phase. In the legacy Pali code, this is known as Vipassana, or body sweeping meditation.
Yes.
So how do you run a defrag on a human body?
Well,
Because I've run disk defragmenters on old Windows 95 machines where you literally watch the little colored blocks rearrange themselves on the screen. How does a human do that?
you do it exactly as the ancient monks did, and exactly as Ferrer suggests, though with a different underlying goal.
Okay, how?
You do it through highly concentrated somatic scanning.
Overclocking your attention.
Yes. You sit down, close your eyes to reduce visual data load, and you move the cursor of your attention slowly and methodically through the physical body.
You scan localized sensations.
Right. You aren't thinking about your body. You are directly observing the raw data of heat, cold, tingling, pressure, and pain.
What exactly am I looking for when I run this scan?
You are looking for the compressed knots of data.
Knots of data.
Let me give you an example. You have a terrible, stressful meeting at work.
Ugh, happens all the time.
Hours later, you are sitting on your couch, supposedly relaxing, but your chest feels tight and your stomach is in knots. What is actually happening?
The selfroot kit is hoarding data.
Exactly. The rootkit encountered unpleasant data during that meeting aversion and attempted to block it.
It tried to freeze the data stream.
Yes. It took a massive chunk of temporal voxels and compressed them into a localized block in your physical nervous system.
Oh, wow.
That tight chest is a literal thermodynamic compression of unprocessed data.
It is a corrupted cache file.
Yes.
So when I scan my body and I feel that knot of anxiety in my stomach, I've located the corrupted file.
You found the memory leak?
Okay, here is where I have to push back hard.
Right.
I understand the IT analogy. Open the task manager, locate the corrupted file, run the defrag.
Right.
But why do I have to feel the physical sensations to defragment them?
What do you mean?
If my problem is a corrupted mental file, like obsessing over what my boss said in the meeting, why can't I just run a mental script to delete it? Why can't I just go to therapy, talk through the mental narrative, realize my boss was just having a bad day, and resolve the issue mentally?
Right.
Why do I have to sit there in silence and painfully feel my stomach tying itself in knots?
Because your body is the hardware where the data is actually stored.
Wait, explain that.
The mental script, the obsessive thought, the narrative about your boss, the psychological analysis that is all just the user interface.
It's the GUI.
It's a little pop-up window on your monitor that says, "Error. Boss was mean."
Okay.
Closing the pop-up window doesn't delete the malware from the hard drive.
No.
You can go to therapy and close pop-up windows for 10 years. You can talk endlessly about the narrative.
But the actual trauma, the actual system latency.
The unresolved aversion is stored as a physical thermodynamic compression in your nervous system.
The body keeps the score.
Precisely. To clear the memory leak, you have to bypass the GUI entirely.
You have to stop analyzing the pop-up window and bring the cursor of your attention down to the bare metal of the physical sensation.
You observe the knot in your stomach without generating a narrative about it and without trying to push it away.
You just observe the raw hex code of the tension.
By applying pure bare metal observation to those physical sensations, you introduce the cooling protocol.
And what happens?
You dissolve the blockage. You literally watch the solid knot of tension break apart and defragment back into the native, high-frequency, smoothly flowing flux.
That makes terrifying perfect sense. You have to go to where the files are actually taking up space on the physical drive.
Exactly.
You can't think your way out of a hardware problem. You have to run a hardware diagnostic.
You have to.
And this ties directly into the quad-core kernel upgrade we discussed during the Silicon Sutra detour a few weeks ago.
It does, because if you successfully defragment the system and clear out the corrupted files, you still need a way to process the ongoing data stream.
Right, because the data doesn't stop.
No, it never stops. You need new drivers to replace the old, buggy firewall.
Because if you just defrag your hard drive but keep running the self-root kit, you'll just build new knots of tension tomorrow.
Exactly. You'll just fill the drive right back up.
So what is the new driver?
If you are going to drop the ego's firewall, you must install the quad-core kernel.
In the legacy Pali code, these are the 4 Brahma Viharas, the sublime states.
But for this specific diagnostic, we are looking at core 4.
Which is upekkha, or equanimity.
Yes.
Ferrer mentions something similar, doesn't he?
Ugh.
He calls it firmness in the face of the world. A groundedness in the sacred matrix.
He does. But Ferrer approaches it psychologically.
And the TPS framework defines it technically.
Equanimity is not apathy. It is not emotional detachment. Equanimity is system stability.
We called it a 0-point cooling mechanism in the earlier devlogs.
It is the ultimate cooling mechanism. Equanimity allows you to keep your localized hardware functioning.
Meaning you maintain your physical autonomy,
Yeah.
you know your name, you don't dissolve into a puddle of porous New Age fog.
Right, but you fundamentally upgrade your software.
You become what the manual calls a white hat router.
Yes, a white hat router doesn't block data, and it doesn't hoard data.
It efficiently passes massive amounts of incoming data from the peer-to-peer cluster.
Exactly.
The peer-to-peer cluster being the rest of the universe. Other people, nature, events.
Right. You achieve communion with the world without your personal processor overheating.
So when you are operating with equanimity,
You experience the pain and joy of the world completely. But the data flows through your architecture rather than getting stuck and burning out your motherboard.
that sounds like the absolute pinnacle of human existence. Unblocked, zero latency processing of reality.
It is.
And up to this point, it really seems like Jorge Ferrer and the TPS Centaur team are holding hands, walking down the exact same path.
They really are. They both agree on the glitch. The buffered self causes alienation and cosmic loneliness.
They both agree on the danger.
Yeah.
Don't just dissolve into the porous self and invite a psychotic buffer overflow.
And they even agree on the diagnostic tool. Somatic awareness, feeling the body, defragmenting the hardware.
It is a near-perfect alignment.
Until the very last step.
Which brings us to the climax of this deep dive, the ultimate divergence.
Yeah, this is the big one.
Because right at the finish line, when they are deciding what to actually do with this optimized system,
Ferrer and the Centaur team violently disagree.
this is where the Centaur team pulls the emergency brake on Ferrer's philosophy.
And on almost all of Western psychology, to be honest.
Let's lay out Ferrer's ultimate solution first. What is his grand conclusion?
Ferrer claims that the solution to our alienation is to realize that the self is not a noun. It is a verb.
It's a verb. We do not have a self. We do a self.
Exactly. Self-securing.
Yes. He argues that we self in relation to others through our interactions, our environment, our somatic awareness.
And his conclusion is that by self-securing, better.
By relating to the world with more openness, feeling our bodies deeply, and engaging in this dance of mutual creation.
We create a healthier, upgraded, more connected identity.
He calls this the participatory self.
I mean, that sounds lovely. That sounds like the goal of every modern therapy session, every wellness retreat, and every self-help book ever written.
It does.
Build a better, healthier, more connected self. What could possibly be wrong with that? What is the TPS override?
The TPS protocol operates at the bare metal root level. Okay.
It looks at Ferrer's beautiful, well-adjusted participatory self and issues a fatal error command.
A fatal error command.
The Centaur team states unequivocally, we do not want to build a better, more participatory self.
And we want to execute a permanent system halt on the malware.
Yes.
We don't want a better virus. We want the virus gone.
Exactly. What is so fascinating here is how psychological UI fixes like Ferrer's conclusion, or almost all of Western psychotherapy.
Yeah.
They always try to save the ego at the very last minute.
Oh, wow. They really do.
They bring you right to the edge of the abyss. They show you exactly how the ego is causing all your suffering.
But then they pull you back and just give the ego a new job description.
Exactly. You used to be an isolated, lonely, miserable ego. But congratulations, after years of therapy and somatic experiencing, you are now a spiritual, participatory, highly connected ego.
But you're still running the rootkit.
You are. You have just draped a nice spiritual blanket over the overheating server rack.
Because psychology is designed to fix the SHUI.
It is designed to make the user interface more pleasant so you can function in society.
It isn't designed to rewrite the BIOS.
No, it is not.
And TPS is rewriting the BIOS.
Which introduces the most difficult, mind-bending concept in the entire architecture.
The ultimate truth of the system. The null pointer.
Yes. In the legacy Pali Code, this is known as anatta, the doctrine of no self.
This is the hardest pill to swallow in the entire framework.
And it is the exact point where most people close the book and walk away.
We need to spend serious time breaking down the null pointer, because this completely shatters the illusion we've been living under our entire lives.
We do.
What exactly happens when a user follows the diagnostic protocol perfectly?
Let's walk through the sequence.
Okay, lay it out.
You overclock your attention through deep concentration.
Right.
You run the defrag phase by scanning the physical body, dissolving the thermodynamic knots of craving and aversion.
You clear out the memory leaks.
You achieve system stability, or equanimity, where the data stream is flowing flawlessly without friction.
Okay, the system is cooled down.
At that precise moment of zero latency, you turn the cursor of your attention inward to inspect the raw, bare metal hex code of your own consciousness.
You look for the core processor. You look for the I.
Yes, you look for the central user.
You look for Jorge Ferrer's participatory self.
You look for your soul, your inner child, your higher self.
Yeah, and what do you find?
What you discover is a shocking architectural truth.
Which is?
The variable user ID points to empty memory.
It points to nothing.
It is a null pointer. There is no user. There's only processing.
Oh, wait. I need you to explain how that is physically possible.
Okay.
Because if I look inside, I feel like a me. I am experiencing this conversation right now. How can the user ID be empty?
Look at what's actually happening. The system is rendering data, sensations are happening,
Right.
Sounds are being processed by the auditory cortex, thoughts are arising, decisions are being calculated based on biological algorithms and past conditional logic.
What the legacy calls karma.
Exactly. All of this processing is happening at trillions of cycles per second.
Okay, but
But there is no central I sitting in a control room inside your head watching it all happen.
Then what is the I that I feel? What is the ego?
The I is just a loading icon.
Oh, loading icon.
That is a post hoc rationalization. It flashes on the screen a fraction of a millisecond after the data has already been processed, claiming credit for the work.
Oh, wow. That's insane.
The brain computes an action based on environmental stimuli, the action is executed, and then the self-root kit generates a tiny retroactive data packet that says, I chose to do that.
So it's entirely an illusion.
Entirely. The self is not a noun, and it is not a verb. It is a null pointer.
It references a memory address that does not contain any data.
Yes.
Okay, I have to jump in here.
Go ahead.
If my core directory is totally, undeniably empty, who is going to work tomorrow morning?
The biochassis?
But who loves my kids? Who is paying the mortgage? If there's no me, doesn't the whole system just collapse into a vegetative state? How do you live a normal life if you delete the user?
This is the exact fear that keeps the self-rootkit installed.
It's terrifying.
The rootkit is a survival mechanism, and its greatest trick is convincing you that if you delete it, the computer dies.
It convinces you that without the ego, you won't be able to love your family or cross the street without getting hit by a car.
Exactly. Which is why people cling to the buffered self so tightly.
It feels like life or death.
But it is the ultimate lie of the malware. Think about your laptop again.
Okay.
When you finally locate a virus that is hogging 90% of your CPU and you hit delete, the computer doesn't stop working.
It works way better.
The biochassis continues to function perfectly. In fact, it functions optimally for the very first time in its existence.
What does it actually look like in daily life? A human walking around with no user ID.
You still go to work. The biological algorithm recognizes the necessity of gathering resources to maintain the chassis. You still recognize your name when someone calls it, because your brain has a highly efficient database for social interactions.
And love.
You still love your family because biological care and connection are inherent to the mammalian hardware.
But what's missing?
The thermal drag. You do all of those things without the massive, exhausting friction of the self-rootkit, constantly trying to claim ownership of the data stream.
You stop buffering.
You stop buffering.
Give me an example of the difference.
Okay, when a moment of joy happens, say you are watching your child play in the park.
Yeah.
You experience that joyfully at absolute maximum bandwidth.
Because you aren't recording it on your phone.
Exactly. And because the rootkit is gone, you don't instantly ruin the moment by worrying about how fast they are growing up.
Or feeling sad that the day is almost over.
Right. The data packet of joy arises, it is processed flawlessly, and it passes away.
And what about negative data?
When pain happens, physical illness, a financial setback, a breakup, the nervous system processes the raw data of the pain. But you do not generate a massive secondary narrative about how unfair the universe is, or how you are a victim, or how you will be lonely forever.
The primary pain is processed, but the secondary suffering, the dukkha, the system latency, is eliminated.
The system operates with zero lag. You aren't a participatory self. You are simply the localized expression of the universe processing itself flawlessly.
That is a staggering paradigm shift. It completely flips the script on how we are taught to solve our psychological problems.
Which is why the TPS framework is so necessary.
Ferrer did incredible work identifying the glitch.
He did. The buffered self is a profound description of modern misery.
But his solution, and the solution to mainstream psychology, is to just polish the armor.
Right. The TPS protocol demands that we step out of the armor entirely and recognize that there was never anyone inside it to begin with.
Let's pull all of this together and summarize the massive ground we just covered.
Good idea.
We started with Jorge Ferrer's highly relatable psychological theory of alienation. We took that feeling of cosmic loneliness and mapped it to the TPS system's architecture, realizing that our profound isolation isn't a flaw in our soul,
but literally just CPU thrashing caused by a background program called the self-rootkit hoarding resources.
And we saw that we can't just brute force drop our defenses without a driver upgrade.
Because exposing legacy hardware to the raw flux leads to system crashes and psychosis.
Right. So to fix the hardware, we have to recognize that we are actively rendering reality, frame by frame.
We run deep hardware diagnostics.
Somatic defragmentation, scanning the body, to locate and dissolve the corrupted files of craving and aversion.
This cools the system down and installs the equanimity drivers, turning us into white hat routers.
And finally, we confronted the ultimate divergence.
The null pointer.
We discovered that trying to build a better, more spiritual self is just putting a fresh coat of paint on a virus.
The true fix, the ultimate bare metal hack, is recognizing the null pointer, realizing the user ID is empty.
This isn't just abstract computer science or obscure Buddhist philosophy. This is highly practical systems administration for your daily life.
Absolutely.
The next time you feel that deep, familiar sting of alienation or that overwhelming knot of anxiety in your chest.
Do not view it as a personal failure.
Right. Do not craft a multi-layered story about how you are unlovable, broken, or fundamentally disconnected from the universe.
Recognize it simply as a system latency notification.
You are experiencing thermal heat from a background process that is hoarding resources.
You are a biochassis processing a bug.
You have the tools to open the diagnostic console. You have the ability to defrag the drive.
You really do.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to chew on.
Leave them with something good.
If the authors C4 Chaos and the Centaur team are right, if your core identity, the thing you have called I your entire life, the voice in your head listening to these words, is really just a user ID variable that actually points to empty space.
Yeah.
What happens when you finally stop trying to populate that empty folder?
That's the real question.
We started this deep dive talking about a smartphone desperately draining its battery to connect to a phantom network.
Burning up all its RAM.
If you wake up tomorrow and realize you aren't the user, but simply the raw, beautiful processing of the universe itself, what is the very first thing you choose to render?